Hey guys, we took notes yesterday on our first 3 strategies. I'm going to show you 3 more today. So you can put them on the same page or you can kind of fold them into a new page, whatever works best for you. But here's kind of what we talked through yesterday about simplifying trig expressions and what strategies we could use. You'll see the ones we talked about yesterday. I'm going to add 3 more. They're all about factoring, and I'm going to chunk them into 3 kind of shorter videos. So you can go back and just watch whatever one you need instead of trying to lump them all in at once. So it'll probably kind of wrap up, and then I'll start the next one, and then I'll start the next one. So I am also going to do them on a fresh page just so that these are all together because they're all focused on factoring. So as I set up my next page, since I'm kind of treating it like it's its own page of notebook paper, I'm just going to call it just 5.1 continued. And then from there, the next strategy, remember S stands for strategy. S4 in this case is factor out a GCF. You did factoring, and we've talked a little bit about factoring, but basically we're looking for, so factoring out a GCF is the distributive property backwards. So if I want to look at an example, and I always want to look at an example, it's just a Visto thing. I've got cosine theta minus cosine theta and sine squared theta on the second one. Okay, and so what I hope you see here is I've got cosine in each part. I've got cosine in my first term, and then I've got cosine in the term being subtracted. And so I'm going to say, I'm going to factor that out. And factoring, I'm just doing the distributive property backwards. So I'm going to pull that to the front. And I'm going to undo the distributive property. So now I've got my cosine theta that I factored out. And then 1 in the first spot, right, minus sine squared theta. And the reason we put a 1 there is if we think that about GCF as reverse distributive property, the nice thing with that is I've got to have a place for everything. So I started with cosine. That would just multiply with 1 to stay as cosine. Okay. Now, as I look at this, 1 minus sine squared, we started talking when we were doing strategy 2 about how we have these Pythagorean identities. And if we see something squared and it's with a 1, or if we see things squared being added together, subtracted together, whatever, that was a good trigger in our brain. And in this case, 1 minus sine squared equals cosine squared. So in those parentheses where I underlined it with that blue box, I'm going to change that to a cosine squared theta. And now I can just clean it up. I've got 1 cosine in the front, 2 in the parentheses, so I'm going to write cosine to the 3rd theta. So that's factoring out a GCF and looking for, hey, what do these 2 things have in common? How can I use that? How can I make it look a little bit better? So I'm going to pause this video and I am going to just kind of leave them chunked, like I said, so that way you can just think about each part individually. And if you only want to watch one part again, you totally can. So stay tuned for strategy 5.